Hey everybody, welcome to the That's So Youngstown podcast. I'm Chris Pugh. I'm the editor of Mahoning Valley, and I have a special guest with us today. Mahoning Valley native, former Major League Baseball pitcher, and the founder or co-founder with his wife of Endurance.org, Dave Dravecky. Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, fantastic. Dave, Boardman native, from what I understand, right?
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about your upbringing. You were a native of Boardman. You went to college in Youngstown State. Obviously, got noticed by Major League Baseball from Youngstown State. What was like growing up in the Boardman area and pitching for Youngstown State like?
It was wonderful. When I think about my early years growing up, it was a great place to live. It was a great place to be a kid. We were literally a couple blocks away from Mill Creek Park.
Hmm.
And so as kids, we spent a lot of time down in the park. And I remember getting up and in the winter, we would go down in the park, find a field and play football. When
Wow.
it got really cold after the fall, when it got really cold in the winter, some of the ponds down in the park would freeze over and we go, carrying our hockey sticks and skates and go play hockey.
Hmm.
And then obviously I loved playing baseball. I ran track, I played football, I played basketball. And so, growing up as a kid with all those options was just amazing. And one of the things I loved about that was mom and dad were just a huge support in us. I had four other brothers, and actually, as I was growing up, there were three, and then the youngest came along 19 years after me. So, bottom line was that, mom and dad were driving us all over town because we had baseball games, we had basketball games, we had football games, we had track and field, and it was absolutely amazing. Dad was my coach for Little League, and loved having him as a coach. And what was really cool was mom and dad didn't try and live their dream through me or any one of us. They always encouraged us to pursue stuff that we wanted to do, that we loved to do. And I just love playing sports. So, playing Little League, Pony League, Colt League, Sandlot baseball, Class AA ball in Youngstown was a ton of fun. Went to Boardman High School, and then I'll never forget after my senior year at Boardman, Jack Jones, the baseball coach, came up to me, the head coach, and he said, "Dave, I really think you've got the opportunity to play at the next level." But as I share in my story when I travel the country, sharing my story, I tell people that there wasn't one university in the entire country that recruited me to play for them.
Hmm.
So because I love the game and I still wanted to play because I didn't think it was done, and my coach actually thought I had the ability to play at the next level. I walked on at Youngstown State University and I played there for 4 years and had a wonderful career at YSU. And then in my fourth year at Youngstown State, I didn't have a great year. I was 3-2, but I pitched one good game, really good game against Clarion State,
Hmm.
where I think I went 7 innings, struck out 14, and gave up 3 hits.
Wow.
And there was a scout from the Dodgers and a scout from the Pirates that were there. And so I ended up getting invited to a pre-draft tryout down at Three Rivers Stadium, and threw 1 inning. And I think it was an immaculate inning. I threw 9 pitches and got out of the inning with all 3 outs, and went up to Murray Cook, who was the farm director at the time, and said, "So what do I do now?" And he just looked at me and he said, "Well," he said, "if you get a phone call from a major league team over June 6th, 7th, and 8th, then congratulations. But if not, then go out and get a real job." And so on the second day of the June draft that year, the Pittsburgh Pirates selected me in the 21st round. And it was an incredible thrill for me and my family, and just getting an opportunity to play professional baseball with the dream of someday getting to the big leagues. And my two heroes, Chris, were Sandy Koufax and Vida Blue. I wanted to be just like them. Fast forward, when I did get to the big leagues, I wasn't like them because they were so much better. But I still had a major league career, which I was really grateful for, and I still looked up to those guys regardless, because of what they inspired me to do in pursuing, my dream to be a major league baseball player. So, Yeah, when I put that pirate uniform on in the minor leagues, man, that's when it all started, and it was just a ton of fun. And but I look back on those years with great fondness. Growing up in Youngstown, Ohio, and in particular in Boardman, going to Boardman High School, and just being a part of that community. I look back on that with fond memories and very grateful for the support of the people in that community over the years, and just grateful to be a part of that community. It's got still have a lot of good friends back there, and my dad's still back there along with my brothers, and so it's just it's a very special place for Jan and I.
That had to be quite the moment. Like, you think about times in your life, like maybe your first job, or when you propose to your wife and she's like, I got to think about this or something. What was that like when you're at home waiting for the call? Because I know at that time there wasn't quite the coverage of baseball drafts that we would see today. So you really didn't know. I mean, what was that like to wait by the phone and say, hey, I might be a baseball player, or I might be a sock boy somewhere, or wherever else the case might be? That had to be a little nervous, right? You're just sitting there waiting for the call.
Yeah, it was very nerve-wracking because you're sitting there and you've put 4 years in at Youngstown State University, and and unfortunately I was on the 10-year plan and getting my degree.
Yeah.
So that was a check against me. But in reality, I really loved in the summer. Not only did I play sandlot baseball during that period of time, but I also worked as a landscaper for Terrace Gardens way back in the day. And I absolutely fell in love with horticulture. So I thought to myself, if I don't make it as a professional baseball player, then I'm going to go back to horticulture school and I'm going to learn landscaping because I loved being outside working. So a part of that year, my fourth year, that summer waiting for the call, was realizing there's one of two things that's going to happen. I'm going to either get the opportunity, or I'm going to start putting this other plan in place to be able to make a living and provide. And I was coming back after that year in the minor leagues to get married too as well. So either way, Jan and I were either going to get married in the fall, or we were going to probably get married right then and there, depending on whether or not I got drafted by the Pirates or had to go into working, in relationship to my not making it in pro ball and having to do landscaping. So anyway.
Yeah, very interesting. And after you got drafted by the Pirates, I mean, San Diego is where you started your career at. Was it different because, like, you grew up in Boardman, you went to college at Youngstown State? I'm sure your family had a chance of traveling from time to time, but you spent most of your growing up at Youngstown. How different was it to? I'm sure you played at various places in the minor leagues, but especially once you got to San Diego, you became a West Coast guy. Was that kind of a adjustment from growing up in one area and ending up on the other side of the country?
No, it wasn't an adjustment at all. I mean, when you're on the West Coast, I mean, it's awesome. It was amazing, and it was something that I had never experienced before because we were always going to the West Coast of Florida.
Oh,
that's where we went on vacations and all of that. So as I moved into the minor leagues and then eventually got to the big leagues, obviously going to San Diego was like this incredible adventure into California to experience all these cool things. But in between that, Chris, I had a chance to play in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Then I went, in my next year, I got called up to AA and played in Buffalo, New York. I went back to Buffalo, New York in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
In 1979 and 1980, I got sent to Columbia, South America for winter ball, those 2 winters.
Oh, wow.
So then in the spring of 1981, I was working out with the AAA team, and with 4 or 5 days left in spring training, that's when I got traded to San Diego. So they shipped me off to Amarillo, Texas.
So you've seen the whole country.
I'm seeing everything.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing every culture. I mean, you got buffalo wings, and then you got Whataburger in Amarillo.
Yeah.
And you got all this, you got the barbecues of Texas, and you got the barbecue of Buffalo and their buffalo wings, and the traditions of all those cultures that we had a chance to be exposed to together, my wife and I both. It was absolutely incredible. In 1982, before we got called up to the big leagues, I played 6 weeks in Hawaii
Oh, wow.
because the Padres AAA team was in Hawaii at the time. So we got to experience the Hawaiian culture too as well. And that's where our daughter Tiffany was born. And then from there, I get called up to San Diego, and we go to San Diego, and I mean, we just fell in love with that city. And we started developing great relationships, and I'm a big leaguer now, and all these wonderful things are happening. And it was just an incredible experience. So, moving out to the West Coast from being raised in the Midwest, so to speak, there wasn't any culture shock for us at all.
Yeah.
From our standpoint, we love the adventure of being in all these different places prior to that, which I think prepared us for that experience in San Diego because we weren't afraid to change.
And I think you've seen everything with San Diego because I know, you were with that team that won the pennant in '84. And I know the team had some tough times. I think that was what led to your trade to the Giants. But it sounded like San Diego was a fun experience. You got to see a lot of everything from what the team went through.
Oh yeah, and those 4.5, almost 5 years in San Diego were wonderful. I mean, I had a chance to play for the Kroc family. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really rare. When you look back on baseball, now it's really rare for a family to own the team.
Yeah.
You have multiple owners. You have corporations like in Atlanta that own the ball club, Comcast. And when you think about playing for an owner that it's family owned and operated, it was amazing because the Kroc family every winter, all the guys that stayed in San Diego, and we were one of those couples, we all got invited to a Christmas party at the Kroc house.
Oh, wow.
And we had a chance to go there, and she would buy gifts for all the kids. And I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. And then with all the guys that lived in San Diego and stayed there, we all stayed connected. So we all spent time together. I worked out with Tim Lawler every spring before spring training rolled around to be ready to start the season. So yeah, San Diego was awesome. And then, to meet the people that we met while we were in San Diego and the friends that we started to make, because I was actually hoping that I would end my career in San Diego. I mean, that was my goal. I'm a very loyal person. And so, playing for the Padres in the big leagues, I wanted to end my career with the Padres like Tony Gwynn did.
Yeah. Well, and, the team had some tough times. Sometimes you trade your vets for people. And, you went to the Giants from there. And the Giants, you're still working there now. And what a experience for you. I mean, the team did well. You got traded there in '87. You went right to the playoffs, and it seemed like a lot of good things were happening in your career when you joined the Giants.
Yeah, it was amazing. Came over to the Giants and stepped into an environment that at the time was much different from the Padres. Larry Bowa was managing the Padres at the time. I wasn't pitching well. The club wasn't doing well. And yet, you're still going out every day and you're trying to do everything you can to help the ball club. And all of a sudden, you go from a team that doesn't want you to a team that wants you. And they're saying to you, you guys are some of the final pieces of the puzzle that's going to take us to the promised land.
Yeah.
And I think I ended up that second half with them. I was 3-7 with the Padres when I got traded, and I think I ended up 7-5.
Yeah.
With the Giants, and then went into postseason play in '87, pitched the two best games of my career, and shutting out the Cardinals in the playoffs, the NLCS, and game 2, throwing a 2-hit shutout, and then in game 6, lost 1-0, and went up against John Tudor both times. So being in the Giants organization, plus the other thing about the Giants organization was, you enter into this organization, and all of a sudden in the spring of 1988, who's walking in the clubhouse? Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Gaylord Perry, Juan Marichal, Orlando Cepeda. All these guys are Hall of Famers. And from time to time, you would see Monty Irvin, who was also in the Hall. I mean, there was so much history in this organization. And there was a sense of pride when you put that uniform on. And so, I mean, that's what I experienced by being a Giant. And then 1988 on opening day, I'm given the ball. I'm the number one pitcher. I'm the number one guy in their starting rotation, and I get the ball on opening day. And I mean, you couldn't have received a greater honor.
Yeah.
And, going up against the Dodgers that day, packed house, I was facing Fernando Valenzuela. And I ended up giving a home run up to Steve Sachs on the very first pitch of the game. And he guessed the pitch coming. And he actually told me this years later. He said, "You always got me out on your cut fastball."
Mm-hmm.
So I knew you were going to start me off with a cut fastball in, and I stepped in the bucket and I pulled it down the line and got a home run. And, and I'm standing on the mound thinking to myself, okay, God, what is this going to be like?
Yeah.
But that from that point forward, Chris, I ended up throwing a 3-hit shutout after that and went 9 innings.
Yeah.
And so we defeated the Dodgers that day 5-1. And I thought, man, I'm on my way. I'm on my way to winning 20 games this year. And as you know, 1988 was when I was diagnosed with cancer in my left arm. Small lump had developed into half the size of a golf ball that was sticking out of my left arm. And the doctors were now telling me I had cancer.
Well, and yeah, let's start talking about that. But before we get there, one of the things that you've been well known for, we all have different types of faith, and we all believe in different things. But you've had a real strong Christian faith. You've talked about, and it's been said about you. You've made some friends with the Padres and Giants and shared your Christian faith. How important was that as we start talking about what happened later in '88? Because man, cancer can scare anybody. But
Yeah.
It sounds to me from reading your book and everything I've heard about you that obviously faith was something that you can cling to during really rough times. How did that faith that you had in your life and was helped by your friendships, how did that help you once you got into that cancer diagnosis? That had to encourage you where maybe some people couldn't get that if they didn't have that faith.
Well, yeah, obviously it was extremely encouraging. I mean, having that faith was the foundation that I was able to stand on. And the reason why was because of the promise that comes with faith in Jesus. And that promise was the hope of eternity, eternal life with him. And so understanding that about my faith and the fact that I was forgiven and set free from sin and entered into a relationship that would last forever was what was the foundation of helping me one step at a time walk through the struggles of being diagnosed with cancer, because that journey wasn't perfect, Chris. And the other part of my faith that was so important was understanding the significance and the power of grace. Grace is not a license to sin. Grace is something that is so amazing, and it came with such a great cost. And yet, in the middle of the struggles of my story, that grace became a very powerful thing that helped me to continue moving forward, trusting God with my life and trusting him for the strength to endure. So how did that happen? Well, that all comes about through the people that God placed in my life to encourage me every step of the way. And I will tell you that there were many times that I didn't have the strength to hold on anymore to that faith.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned was when my grip got so loose that I couldn't hold on anymore and I had to let go, that I actually fell into his loving embrace. And that's the beauty of my faith. That's the significance. It's the understanding of the gift that was given, the grace that is offered throughout your entire story, knowing that on my worst day, I was still going to be loved more than I can comprehend, which allowed me to keep moving towards him and not away from him, and also living with the hope of that promise. That was the beautiful part of being able to endure in this story. Regardless of whether or not the outcome was good or bad, I could endure to that point. Now, I'm very grateful that you and I are sitting here and we're talking with each other. But
Yeah.
it could have been a different story because there's a lot of people out there with a different story. There's a lot of people out there that are still struggling in their stories, and some have lost loved ones, and some have lost their own lives.
Right.
And that's why the message of hope is so important because it's what I long for that matters more than what I'm actually experiencing here on this earth. It's the promise of what's to come, not what I'm dealing with right now.
Well,
But
it
that
puts everything in
promise, though,
perspective.
allows me to deal with it.
Yeah, it puts everything in perspective because, and I want read his book or there's a lot of information about his history, but Dave, you went through an amazing recovery. You wanted to pitch again in August 10th of '89. You got back to the majors. You beat the Reds, but then a couple days later against the Expos, you pitch a couple no-hit innings, and then um, you know your arm pretty much broke.
Yeah.
Pitching to, I believe it was Tim Raines.
Yeah.
How was that? There had to be a ton of thoughts going through that when it happened. Was there, obviously for your faith, you had the perspective saying, "Hey, no matter what happens, it's going to be okay." But was there any, like, what was going through your head when you hurt yourself in that pitch like that? Obviously, pain, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but was there any doubt or concern? I mean, what happened as you were sitting there? Because that had to be a lot to think about.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm I actually had this thought in my mind, oh my gosh, God, there's something going on in my life that is bigger than baseball.
Yeah.
And so I'm laying on the ground, and all I could hear were Bob Knepper's words, who was a teammate and fellow Christian, who 5 hours earlier, Chris, said this to me: Dave, it's not the miracle of the comeback that's so important. It's the miracle of salvation that occurred in your life when you met Jesus in Amarillo, Texas, and became a Christian. And what God is doing is providing a platform through baseball for you to share his love with those who hurt. And I thought to myself, in that moment with Bob at lunch, that's great, but I'm getting ready to start a game.
Right.
Now I'm laying on the ground, and those are the only words that I can hear. And that's why I thought to myself, God, you're up to something so much bigger than baseball. And so in that moment, I was overwhelmed. I wasn't laying there mad, upset, wondering why me, God. But I'm here to say this: there's nothing wrong with being mad or upset or wondering why me, God. Because in our humanity, we have permission to be human. We're not robots. But for me, I didn't have that experience. I didn't have those feelings. I didn't have those thoughts. I was consumed with the idea that there was something going on bigger that's bigger than baseball. And and yet I would march into a season of life after that that would be extremely difficult before I had the opportunity to get to the other side of that pain and suffering to realize what it was that God really wanted me to do with the rest of my life.
And we have this on YouTube, and those who are looking at our website can see this. If you don't know Dave's story, Dave was a left-hander. As a pitcher, his left hand and left arm were gone. From what we understand, you removed that because the cancer kind of spread, and it was kind of like, hey, maybe the cancer could be gone if I removed the arm. Man, what was that like to go through? I mean, I guess it was good because, in essence, you wanted to save your life. But on the other hand, the amputation, everything, man, what kind of thought process went into that?
Well, it's really interesting because prior to all of that, with all the surgeries, the radiation therapy, a staph infection that lasted 10 months, I was frustrated. I mean, my journey emotionally, physically, and spiritually was like this. I mean, it would just ebbed and flowed. It was a lot of highs, a lot of lows. And so it was a real struggle. And when I finally got to the point of the amputation, it was like, oh my gosh, let's get rid of this thing so I can be free from all that crap.
Yeah.
And so we go in, and the doctors obviously believe that my life is now being threatened. So they take the arm and shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But, and so for the first several weeks, everything was fine. and I was adjusting and adapting really well. And as an athlete, I was very grateful because I was coordinated. So being able to use only one hand and one arm wasn't that difficult for me. Buttoning buttons, opening up a can of Coke, opening up a milk carton, those kind of things. They saw me do all that and said, we just need to get you tools to be able to do the things that you want to do. So they introduced me to a rubber mat to place paper on so I could write on it without the paper sliding on a table. On the rubber, it would stay firm. So to this day, I still own two of those rubber mats and I wash them all the time because that's what I purchased when I was at the hospital after the amputation. They brought in card holders to play cards, to play poker. You know, I mean, start thinking about these things. You go, one hand, I'm not going to be able to do this because I'm going to have to set it down, constantly folding it down, picking a card out, making the play if I wanted to play cards. And then there were other things that they brought in that might be helpful. At one point, they brought in a prosthetic device to strap on my body to actually hold an arm there. And when I put that on, Chris, it felt like I was wearing a bra. And I said, there ain't no way.
Yeah.
So I said, And so I said, I don't want a prosthetic. If it's just for aesthetics and what I look like, I don't care. As long as Jan likes me the way I am, I could care less what other people think. So bottom line was that those were all good things. But then about 3 weeks post-surgery, Jan and I are going to counseling for Jan's depression because the demands on us were so overwhelming, Chris, and she felt the responsibility and the weight of responding to everyone. And it was overwhelming. On top of that, being a mother and being a nurse, having a sick husband, and going through all of that, I mean, it was just this slide down. And so we're now in counseling, and I'm there to support her because I don't think I have any issues. And about 3 weeks into the counseling, guess who was on the couch?
Right, you.
It was me.
Yeah.
It was me. And so for the next 18 months, Jan and I went to counseling up in Canton, Ohio, and we drove there. I think it was once or twice a week.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest gift that we could have ever received because I actually learned the art. I was beginning to learn the art of communicating.
Wow.
And how to speak to my wife, how to share my pain, how to share my struggles, because prior to that, I was stuffing it all for fear that if I exposed any of that, I would look weak.
Yeah.
You know, and as an athlete, you're not supposed to show weakness. You know, in your weakness, you lose, you fail. And so wrong. And so much of that is put on our culture. When I discovered that the moment I started talking about the deep pain and the struggle, I began to experience freedom from it. And healing began to take place, which was just huge. And so Jan and I went through that for 18 months, and it was a huge gift from God. And it got us to the other side. And then as a result of going through all the struggles and the frustrations, I became really angry, you know, and unfortunately in my anger, because at that time, prior to the counseling, I didn't know how to articulate my pain. That anger came out in verbal abuse towards my wife and kids. And so once we got through the counseling, which helped to deal with some of that, we moved to Colorado and we discovered that there was a counselor there that dealt with anger. And so I went to him for a whole year. And the gift of that was that Jan came with me to understand me. And man, that was just so cool. So 30 months of counseling to get to the other side of this. And I'm still learning, Chris. I mean, you know, there's still moments, but the Mount Vesuvius anger hasn't been there since going through the counseling. And I'm so grateful for that. It's not that there hasn't been anger, but it's been managed more effectively. It's been worked through. I've been able to articulate what's going on inside of me, to define why I feel like I'm getting angry. And all those tools have been helpful for me to move on this journey of life, being healthy and getting healthier. And yet I still know I have a long way to go. And yet that was the beginning of really understanding a lot of very important things about myself, about my wife, and about our journey together. So.
I know we're over on time, but two quick things I wanted to ask about. I know it's hard for athletes sometimes when your career's over, no matter how it ends, if you've played 25 years or if you had an injury like yours that prematurely ended your career, it's tough. But I think you seem to have a really great experience by being ambassador for the Giants. So obviously your playing career is over, but it seems like you're still involved with the team, helping out, and it sounds like you still love baseball, so you get to kind of have that too. It sounds like a win-win-win for you.
Oh, it's a huge win-win-win. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. They 13 years ago they asked me to come back and be a part of the family, and so I had this huge gap from when I retired in 1989 all the way up until 2006. And when we were living in Colorado, Clint Hurdle invited me to come and be a part of the Rockies as a volunteer. And he said, I just want you to shag in the outfield during BP and get to know my pitchers and just encourage them. I've got a pitching coach in Bobby Apodaca. He's doing the pitching stuff with these guys, but I want you to encourage them emotionally. I want you to be there for them and listen to them and be an encouragement to them. So that was my first experience after retiring of getting back in uniform. And then after 2006, I stopped doing that and didn't get back into the game until 13 years ago when the Giants said, hey, do you want to become a part of the family? And I said, are you kidding me? I
Yeah.
said, absolutely. I said, but I don't want to be in a uniform. They go, no, we don't want you in a uniform. We want you to be an ambassador. We want you to be one of the faces of several guys in the organization that are alum that will be available to do different things for the organization in the Bay Area. And so, Chris, it has been such a privilege and honor to be able to represent the Giants, be a part of the family, be with the fans, engage with corporate sponsors, hang out with fans, regardless of whether or not they're season ticket holders or just your everyday fan,
Mm-hmm.
and being a part of something that is just bigger than any one individual, but understanding that all the guys that used to be in the Giants uniform are all a part of this big thing called the San Francisco Giants.
Well, and I want to ask you at the end about your endurance mission and everything, but man, as a fellow believer, it's got to be, man, your journey is so different and complicated. I know going through it, there's probably times where like, why did I do this? But I gotta say, it's interesting how God works. You think, hey, my mission is going to be to win 400 games, be the next Cy Young, and I can share about God during that time. But sometimes God uses this thing where I'm sure, like you said, your friend that talked to you before you hurt yourself in the Montreal game, that helped you. But probably you weren't getting that many thoughts about that beforehand. So it
No.
kind of seemed like God was able to use kind of a strange, awful story to his glory. I mean, it's helped you as a person, but now you get to share your story with fans and other people, I'm sure, who remembered you and everything. It seems to be great, too, from that aspect as well.
Oh, it's been incredible. And Jan and I are so grateful for the opportunity that God has given us. Because you see, what we've come to understand, Chris, is this. As a professional baseball player, reaching the pinnacle of your particular profession, I was at the highest level.
Yeah.
And had I stayed there, I doubt very much that I would still be doing what I'm doing today. I mean, we started endurance 32 years ago,
Yeah.
and we are still doing that. I started speaking about 30 years ago, and I'm still telling the same story. I've updated it because I've brought it current to where I'm at today, but I still talk about the things of the past. But I try to help people understand all that I've learned and where I'm at today to encourage them to be on that same journey, trusting God. But here's the thing that I think has allowed this to happen. You see, when you're at the pinnacle of success and you stay there and you retire, most people can't relate to that success.
Yeah.
But once you get diagnosed with something that brings you down to their level, and the result is it's that takes you away from the game,
Yeah.
and now you go to the depths of pain and suffering like everybody else does. Now you're no longer up here. You're on even kill with them. So you're just like them. And I think the beauty of what God has done is in my story has brought is the fact that he has brought me to that level to be able to speak to them and encourage them on their journeys and in their stories.
Yeah.
And it is humbling to think that God would use me in that way to share my story, to encourage others, to tell my story of his son transforming my life and providing me the strength to endure. And through that relationship, offering me a hope that never dies or fades. That to me is overwhelming. And so I'm so thankful and so grateful for it, but it hasn't been easy.
Right.
It's been a hard journey, and it's a journey where I learn every day, and I'm being transformed every day into that person that he ultimately has created me to be. And the day that I finally figure it all out is the day that I die and go to the other side and be with him.
Well, and I think too, it's a great way of sharing because someone said, "Man, your life stinks. You lost your arm. You get to play as much as you wanted to." Well, again, you go back to your hope in heaven, where you say, "Look, you know, as cool as playing the major leagues is, my goal here isn't to play more years in the majors; it's more of heaven." So, yeah,
Yeah.
really cool. So, how do we hook up with Endurance? Endurance.org is the website.
Yeah.
Somebody's out here and needs help. And I know not everyone has are Major League Baseball pitchers, but everyone has issues. Like, you know, you lost a family member, you went through a divorce, you got sick, you got whatever the case would be. I'm sure this will apply for a lot of people in need. How do they hook up with you and reach out to your organization?
Yeah, all they really have to do, because we are resource driven, and so all they really have to do is go to our website, and on the website it's pretty self-explanatory as to how to connect to get an encouragement gift box from us. We really do focus on folks who are battling cancer, who have other physical afflictions. I mean, we've worked with families with cerebral palsy, heart conditions. Depression is another huge issue through COVID. The amount of depression requests for Jan's book has been overwhelming. And so we want to be there for folks with amputation, struggling with that. And from time to time, Jan and I will call and actually speak to people who may be in the midst of going through an amputation or in the middle of depression. And we want to encourage them. We're encouragers. And so if there's something that they need that goes beyond what we can offer, we try to help them also find counselors out there that can be an encouragement to them too as well. But all they have to do is go to the website, Chris, endurance.org. All the information's there. 98% of the people that contact us through the website. That is our hub where they can learn a lot about who we are, understand the spiritual perspective that we come from, also knowing that we simply want to come alongside them and love them well through these resources to encourage them on their journey as they face the good, the bad, and the ugly of their days. And that's the easiest way to describe it.
Fantastic. Well, Dave Dravecky, again, Mahoning Valley native, former Major League pitcher, obviously amazing story. And again, read up about him. He has a book that's out. I'm assuming, is that still available? I remember buying that.
Yeah, all you got to do is go to our website. We have a bookstore at our website. We actually have 8 resources that we've done.
Okay, great.
Resources to actually encourage people, like a devotional, and some other aspects, a book on heaven, a book on caring for others. So there's resources that are available. We also have our story, which is actually a trilogy of a trilogy of 4 books. So
Okay. Because I remember reading Comeback. I think that was your first one. Right.
Yep. When You Can't Come Back was our second book, which is really not being able to play baseball and sharing the journey through the pain and suffering. And Jan and I share half of that book each in telling our experiences. And then on the other side of the suffering, we each wrote a book about our journey moving forward. I wrote The Worth of a Man, and she wrote A Joy I'd Never Known. So they can go to the website and get a copy of that there. And the encouragement gift box, by the way, is free. And any of the personal resources that I have in there, I personally sign book plates that are placed in there for them to have an autograph copy.
Fantastic. Well, Dave, again, privileged to talk to you. Again, check out endurance.org. And again, if you don't know his story, buy one of his books or read up on him online. Amazing story of endurance. So hang out for a second afterwards. Thanks for checking out the That's So Youngstown podcast with Chris Pugh and Dave Dravecky. Have a great day, everybody.